Hello, product people. Welcome to the Product for Product podcast, hosted by Matt Green, data advocate and product manager, and Moshe Mikanovsky, product leader and author. Our goal is to serve the product community by helping you find products that can help make your work in product management easier. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Product for Product podcast.
Welcome back. Today we're joined by Paul Ortchanian, CEO and founder of Bain Public. Bain Public is focused on helping startups develop a product-led culture and has developed a methodology called SOAP to help with product planning and roadmap prioritization. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hey, Paul, how are you?
I'm doing good.
And I'm happy to welcome another Canadian. You live in Montreal, right?
Absolutely.
Yes. Although your background is from many other places, I think. So tell us first about yourself, and then also about your company.
Yeah. Well, I'm a creative technologist. I use the left side of my brain for creativity and my right side for engineering. So I was lucky enough to get to San Francisco and start working there in agencies and then in startups, where I realized I wasn't really a true engineer because I guess in the Valley they really need engineers who do zeros and ones, and I'm more of the creative type. But I wanted to unleash that creativity elsewhere, and I realized that the product management was a great way of basically being creative with the UX, UI, with business cases and the why behind the products, as well as like having the engineering technical knowledge. So I migrated into product, had a lot of colleagues there help me, worked in startups, and eventually moved back to Montreal, where about 10 years ago, where I quickly realized there was an emerging startup scene here in Montreal as well as in Canada. But we had a product management problem, which is that people weren't hiring product managers. They didn't know what product managers did. They weren't empowering them. They weren't giving them tools. So we decided to create Bain Public, a company that was focused on parachuting into organizations that don't have product or have product and are just misled or misunderstood and have problems, and work with leadership as well as the product team on putting in place the right tools, the right processes, and having the right communication with the other departments for product to be empowered. Been doing it for 5 years now. Got acquired by Ex Machina last year. Ex Machina is an AI company, and we're really taking a tangent towards the AI angle, product management and AI, which is a passion of mine.
Very nice.
Oh, that sounds exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, this is actually a space where I see, I found more and more companies like yours around the world, but very few of them still. So there's definitely a space out there for really helping companies understand what product management is all about and convert into product focus versus technical focus or sales focus or stuff like that.
Yeah, you know what? We did a lot of competitive research early on before starting the company, and I realized that there's a lot of organizations out there that are focused on helping product managers be product managers. Sometimes I call them kumbaya type of organizations where it's product managers hugging other product managers and telling them it's going to be all right, and talking about their experiences. But the biggest issue is I have nothing against those type of organizations, but I feel that if you're in a B2B company or a B2C company, or if you're in a fintech versus a health tech, the cultures are completely different. So it's very hard for us product managers to come into a room and say, hey, we can share similarities, because the culture of an organization is highly dependent on its leadership and how they empower the product team. And if you're not empowered and you're having an issue and you're going to these groups to discuss, it doesn't really help you basically become a better product manager. It just perhaps like highlights the fact that you need to move from one organization to another, but that doesn't solve the problem. So we decided to attack the problem more from a perspective of process, tools, communications with leadership. Hopefully that will make a change, and that differentiates us and allows us to coexist.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on something important over there. Even if you have this big support of other product managers, even within your organization, if your executive team don't appreciate the value of product, then you have a very hard time really getting there.
Yeah,
So,
it's funny because it's like a lot of organization will be product led initially because the CEO or one of the co-founders is de facto product manager because they
Right.
understand the gray zone the company is trying to innovate in. But eventually what happens is as the company grows, they end up promoting marketers and salespeople. That's very common because they're the ones who basically sell the product and have an impact on the P&L, and their opinions end up weighing a bigger or having a bigger impact and bigger influence on key decisions. So I
Mm-hmm.
find myself a lot with companies where it's very sales driven or marketing driven,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
that's where you want to break down the barriers.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned process and tools. So
Mhm.
with product to product, we're always talking about different tools, and
Mhm.
maybe you could elaborate on that. When you come into an organization, how do you look at the product stack, and how do you look at the processes around it?
Well, it's funny because most of the organizations we get into don't even have tools like product management tools. They've been told to hire a product manager and they don't even know where to start. So HR doesn't even have tools to assess what a good product manager should be or what to look for. And once they hire product managers who maybe has a previous life as a project manager, they basically come in and they become order takers, right? And they're not really like questioning the why. They're not really like looking at the data and trying to, make the product better. And they're trying, but they don't have that product management background. And oftentimes, the tools they use are just Jira, right? Like just basically agile methodology tools. But there is no real space for some of the strategy to live, some of the business cases of why particular features were released, the problems that we're trying to solve, the objectives, the key results, et cetera. These don't have a space, and oftentimes they end up in these Google Docs or whatever Microsoft cloud software, like in these separate documents, decks that the sales team has, the marketing team has. If you were to ask, do you guys have a competitive study? The sales team might have one. If you ask, do you have a persona study? The marketing team might have one, but that doesn't mean the product owns it or nurtures it or reviews it on a regular basis and leverages it in order to help make good product decisions. So you end up with these scattered documents all over and really no tool to put it all together. And these are the product managers that aren't empowered, so they often don't even have the ability to go back to their leadership team and ask for a product such as a product board, AHA, or a Craft or Glider, whatever it is, right? And the reason for that is that it's perceived as an expense, and why would the product management team need tools, right? I've even seen extreme situations where the leadership team doesn't even want to acknowledge the fact that the product team might need data. So having an analytics software is perceived as being a negative, right? And the product team has to fight with leadership in order to get like basic analytics. As far as I'm concerned, Google Analytics is free. They should implement it. But then the IT team would push back and say, look, in order to implement this, it'll take us weeks. And, and it's a big deal, right? And you're like, well, you can't do product if you don't have basic analytics and a basic tool to just collect all these galaxy of ideas and be able to make sense of them and then, provide the reason why you were basically going to build it. So at Bain Public, we created a toolkit, which is basically a foundational product that we just give for free to all the companies we work with. And the reason for it is we don't feel like it's important for us to get into these big discussions about which one of the best in breed product tools is better suited for that organization. We don't want to go into a product pad versus product plan versus product board discussions and having cost evaluated and matrices created to evaluate which one's better. So we feel that it's best for us to put in a process with a very foundational tool that just allows all the product ideas and the galaxy of things that the product managers need, such as the high-level strategy for the company, the competitors, the personas, the business model canvas, as well as the business cases for the reasons why particular features are being built to live in one place. And we did that using a no-code software called Coda. And this toolkit is basically a big I'd say a Google Docs on steroids that has a number of templates that a product management team can use in order to fill in the blanks and eventually use it as a command center for everything product management live under one roof and accessible for anyone in the organization.
Yeah, that's a great approach over there, coming from a consultancy that you're not getting into the weeds of selecting products, which can take time, and then the licensing and all that and onboarding and stuff like that. You created something that can really help your clients. And do you still like clients that you had in the past and you're not working with anymore? Do you still see them or hear from them if they're still using it?
Yeah, it's funny because Coda allows you to see the activity in every single client who's using this toolkit.
Mm-hmm.
So we can go far back as 2 years ago, and we still have clients from those times that are still working with it. They like it. Some of them have actually requested to migrate the toolkit into their version, and we feel like it's a their engagement and their activity is proof that we need to continue investing. And this is why every quarter we actually evaluate what can be made better into the product and just go out and change templates and make the templates better, etc. So this way, any new client who is basically benefiting from it gets a better version of it.
Nice. That's very cool. So tell us a bit about the structure of this tool. And I think you have a name for it, right?
We call it SOAP as well, but this is we kind of call SOAP the process and SOAP the toolkit. And when we parachute into organizations, we basically tell the leadership team that the product management team needs to be doing everything that you can read on blogs and in articles, but there's a tempo at which they need to do it at, and you can't just have discussions with customers all day long, and on top of it basically look at the data, and on top of it talk to engineers, and on top of it you can't do everything at once. So you need to be focusing your time and focus on particular things in any given quarter, so a 3 months time frame, which is about 12 weeks. So we have this plan that basically splits down the 12 weeks into 3 weeks of strategy, 2 to 3 weeks of really digging into the technology and into the parking lot of ideas in order to outline the short-term priorities. Another 3 weeks of good old-fashioned business case writing, a week of prioritization with the leadership, and then 2 weeks of outbound communication, internal and external. And it just ends up basically giving the product team a scenario of this is how a regular quarter should be, and a product manager, if you're as a leader, ask yourself, what should my product team be doing this time at the beginning of a quarter? Then at least you should expect them to be working on questioning the strategy, asking pivot or persevere questions. And that allows most of the organization to adopt the SOAP process. And as they're adopting the SOAP process, the SOAP toolkit is actually adapted for them to go step by step and be able to put in there some of the key elements that you're doing in every week. So we have an entire section in it to establish what we call the high-level strategic baseline, which includes a big, hairy, ambitious goal the product is trying to do, the problems that it's trying to solve, the value proposition, the strategies, the tactics that the company is going to take, as well as the metrics the company is trying to move through those tactics, and then try to see, okay, well, what our competitors have, competitive matrices, what do our personas, what their wants and needs are. Basically, we have this concept of a data closet where every quarter we're trying to get the product team to put in their research about the industry, the market, the competitors, the changing customer needs, and some of the problems in order to be able to identify the galaxy of issues that the product could be addressing. And then we bring that down into what should you be addressing in the next 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, which gives you the short-term priorities, and elaborate these short-term priorities for prioritization exercise with leadership.
So it's not just a one-time thing that they do in the beginning, but it's an ongoing structure that helps them really think about their space, the ecosystem where they live in, and move forward on a regular basis with the same infrastructure, same structure.
Yeah, we established leadership of the organization that someone's responsible to market the industry, the competitive and the customer shifts on a 3-month basis, and to bring it up into new initiatives or as well as problems that needs to be solved. And that's the product team's responsibility. So by giving this space in our software that we call the data closet, which is a very free form space to do research, articles, this, that, etc. But what it really allows the product manager to do is to be that person who is responsible ultimately of not just listening to the sales team or the marketing team, whatever they're bringing up, but also what's happening in the market, the industry, to inform the CEO of, is the strategy still valid? Just point us in the direction, because these shifts might actually, be good, positive, or negative to us. So the pivot and persevere question needs to be asked, and it has to be asked by the product team.
Yeah. So how did you see the companies that you work with, other than your help that you give them specifically, because they need to learn also about product and how to do it, but how do you see them evolving into, companies that really think about the product and build products properly using your tool?
One thing I always tell them is that SOAP is not prescriptive, and we don't want it to be like Agile, where you have to do it the way the book tells you to do it, or else. And we go through 3 months with them in co-working, where our team is basically working with them on doing their first roadmap that goes from strategy all the way down to business case and prioritization. And after that, we just leave them to their own. They can continue using our toolkit. They can continue using our process, but they can choose how they basically want to do it. And we've seen situations where some companies have taken it as is and basically brought it up and scaled it within their organization. And we've seen situations where they've basically taken bits and pieces of it and really adapted it to their organization. For example, we have one organization that sells direct to government, and the SOAP was really good for them in order to establish product management, but they also realized that because they're RFP driven, it's very, very hard for them to go and do these industry market shifts, because ultimately they respond to RFPs, and the sales team they can't sell things that the customer doesn't have. So they introduced this concept of the RFP matrix, which has the product team, instead of looking at the industry and the market shifts, they're basically looking at what are the upcoming RFPs or the past RFPs that we passed on, and what are the features that these RFPs are requesting our product to have, and the ones that we don't have. So this way it gives them an opportunity to identify new features to move the product forward. This helps them a lot, because they end up not being subject to sales, who basically closed an RFP and they won it, but then in the contract is stipulated if these 3 features cannot be delivered by X time, then the company has penalties, and that puts a lot of pressure on product and engineers. So this way the product team is ahead of them. So they've actually integrated it their way, and it's really interesting to see how every company basically just goes out and does their thing. The issue I have is that I realize that ultimately we're not there to ask them to follow SOAP. We're there just to make sure that product management is well understood within the organization. And most organizations I work with at that point are mature enough from a leadership perspective to value it and to empower it.
It's really like any other tool that really needs to fit the organization, rather than for the organization try to fit the tool.
Yeah.
So
we talked about that prior, Moshe. Where do these methodologies work in the greater scope of the culture itself, and what type of leadership do you have?
Yeah.
If you're a product manager and have these 2 jobs, it's extremely hard to, first of all, establish the product function within the organization and make sure that sales, support, marketing, CEO, and the rest of the organization respect product managers, and they basically are okay with the process that you're proposing them. And oftentimes, like you're hitting a lot of walls. On the other hand, you have the job of product management, which is also like moving the product forward and creating value. So it becomes overwhelming for a lot of product managers. So I feel it's important to acknowledge that and work with leadership on just them, raising their awareness of, how can they basically work with a product team. It's a very new concept for most of them.
Yes.
And they don't have experience. So it's important for them to work with third parties, sometimes like us, to help at least level set.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a really good point, especially with established companies, enterprise companies, big organizations. I find it very hard for them to understand. First of all, they try to understand Agile, what Agile is all about. and then unfortunately they end up with safe or stuff like that. And then actually the right time to introduce product to them is also when they try to do agile, because they kind of separate the two things, where agility is really for product management. But then in general, because we're in such a new discipline, there is no discipline yet. So people don't have that discipline for product management, and it's up to us to really get management to understand what it is.
Well, the problem with agile is that it basically, it's very good for projects, because you have a pretty good idea of what the project is, and then you just break it into pieces, and then you
for the delivery. It really was designed for the delivery.
Exactly.
Or at least when I'm saying it was designed, I mean Scrum and all the methodologies. But agile as a concept, or being an agile mindset, it's not about the delivery, it's about the entire product.
It's but I always find that, like, in agile, there is this concept, and it's like the initial one. The leadership team has requested for this delivery, but oftentimes in a startup, the leadership team does not even know what they want to be delivering, right? So agile breaks down in that situation, because they're like, hey, let's go in this direction, let's pivot into that direction, let's try this out. And there's this what I call the drunken walk, where you're trying to figure out this product market fit. And in that case, if you're doing agile, you just end up with the sales team just feeding new tickets to the engineering team on a regular basis. If it's a B2B company, and if it's a B2C company, it's going to be customer support and marketing, right? But that doesn't really lead you to where you want to go as a company in terms of value, because no one's really questioning whether or not this agility is creating value for the organization. And that's where you need to establish the product manager saying, well, and this is not about product management. This is about what I tell most of the organization we work with is, if the product manager is going to take 3 months to define what we are going to be doing next, then the engineering team has 3 months to basically deliver on that what. And that 3 months is basically can be agile. That 3 months could be Kanban. That 3 months could be waterfall. I don't care, right? As long as it's the why and the what has been defined and the delivery date has been set to 3 months. And they always ask me, why 3 months? Agility is supposed to be like ongoing. And it's because most organizations need to tell their customers through the sales team or marketing team of the upcoming features, right? These departments always put a lot of pressure on dates, right? When is this going to be shipping, right? So this way, it's like everything ships on the end of 3 months. It's just like Apple. We're going to go and release the new iPhone, and Safari is included, and the new laptops included, and the new iWatch is included. It's all happening at once, right? And the organization just works towards that time frame. And whether or not through agile, through multiple iterations, they released onto staging, release it on staging. Eventually, everything's going to go in production in 3 months. So this way, everybody's basically has one date to work towards. And that's also a piece of advice that most product managers don't. Sometimes they get stuck into agility, and it's fine if you're in a B2B or a B2C organization, because the customer needs a lot of value. But if you're in B2B and you're selling through a sales team, you don't need agility, because your customers aren't even going to talk to you, because the person who's talking to the sales team is the key decision maker who's not even using the software. So eventually it takes a longer time frame for you to understand what value is for the organizations you're working with. So it's best to just say 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, and create momentum and eventually build that reputational capital with customers as well as with the internal stakeholders to be able to move your product forward.
Some of my past experience with more traditional agile Scrum focused, there was a bit of disorganization, and you can be moving in different areas, moving in different directions, and sometimes not accomplish what the goal was. So having a more structured approach can sometimes pay off, especially when you're trying to deliver to, like you're saying, B2B customers that have a level of expectation of what you're delivering. So
Now let me ask you that about SOAP, because you mentioned that you created it for your clients and you give it as part of your services to your clients. So I guess it's not publicly available out there, but I'm sure that because it's on Coda, it's a structured. Everyone can use Coda, and once they know the structure, they can put it in there. Is there do you write about it, or do you have something public out there that people can look into and get help on that as well?
Yeah, actually, we've always been pretty open source about things, both the process and the toolkit.
Oh, perfect.
So we write a lot of articles, and they're all shared on our website. So we have about 70 articles on product management, and some of it is about the process, some of it is about templates to use. And so I invite you guys to go to bainpublic.com and click on articles and read all the historical ones. But on the other hand, what we do is we give a lot of workshops to accelerators and incubators that would be in Montreal and now more and more with Toronto. And what we do through those accelerators is that we give bits and pieces of those toolkit templates to the ones attending our workshops. And we intend to eventually put everything out there for anybody to use. We're currently at version 4. We actually eat our own dog food. We look at our product or our toolkit as something that we need to iterate on every 3 months. So we're at version 4. We're rethinking some of the templates as our customers has evolved and have become more sophisticated. And eventually, because it's Coda, we just want to put that template out there for the world to basically leverage. I think it goes hand in hand with SOAP, but it can, I've seen a lot of companies just adopt it and start using bits and pieces of it pretty well.
Nice. So that's very cool that you make it available out there. So yeah, we will put also in the description of this episode the links to your website and where people can contact you. So I'm sure that if our listeners they have interest in that, they will check it out.
Yeah, and they can always reach out at info@bainpublic.com, and we're more than happy to share some of these templates. We usually just export them into Word format and send it to them. But the entire experience, I would say, like, we're about a year away before putting it out there to the world to use. We're learning a lot, and we feel like once packaged and final, and there should be a lot of value for product teams. We actually have a company in New Zealand that heard me speak at a podcast, loved SOAP, went to our article section, read everything about SOAP, took the ebook, read that as well, and tried to apply it themselves. So it is self-serve. I would say that there's a lot of like little bits and pieces of information that we give as we meet through this whole process with our clients that they didn't benefit from, but eventually they were able to apply it and leverage it within their organization, which was great to hear.
That's cool. Before we wrap up today, you mentioned AI and product management, and that's also something that I'm really fascinated by. If you could just briefly kind of mention how that's, AI and data science is working with product, that'd be really interesting to hear about.
Yeah, I mean, this is a passion of mine because I have a background in mathematics. So I quickly realized that when you're working on AI projects, or I call them projects because finally they're just initiatives within your product. Just think of the Gmail auto suggest function, right? Mm-hmm. These things are just trying to create value to the end customer through the use of AI and the use of data. And we know that products are creating more and more data, so product managers have to eventually start working with that data. And when you're working with engineers, it's a very deterministic approach to creating software. It's like, if this, then that, right? The engineer will never mess up unless they really don't know how to code. They will always be able to deliver the value that you're talking about. AI is more of a probabilistic approach. It's more of a let's experiment with the data and see if the data is okay and clean enough, and the algorithm is actually pretty good, we might achieve this result. And that's the unique challenge of AI. It's experimental. And it's the responsibility of the product manager to structure and time box that experimentation through a roadmap, which is very hard to do because you're going to the leadership team and you're telling them that we need to first store this data, then we need to understand this data, then we need to predict with this data, right? But in order for us to go into prediction, we have about 16 things we need to do to store data, another 10 things to do in order to understand that data. And at the end of the day, we're trying to predict something that might be like +1 of what a human being would do. So, for example, if a human being is trying to suggest sentences you need to write in Gmail, they would get it right 76% of the time, and we just need this machine learning module to be 77% accurate, right? Because they would just outperform a human, and that's good enough for everybody. And what happens is that the leadership team might think that they want it to be 100% accurate, or you go through 5 or 6 iterations of cleaning the data and creating, working with algorithms when you get to 50% accuracy. And for the leadership team, it's perceived as being unacceptable, right? And then if you were to be asked, how can you make it into 76% accurate? The answers of the data scientists always have to do with better data, cleaner data, better tagging, better, more money. So they oftentimes end up pulling the plug on these AI projects. So what's important here is just to identify with leadership that you need to establish, first off, the benchmark that you're supposed to be hitting. There are alternatives there. Are we trying to predict something? Are we trying to have the machine learning judge something? Are we trying to have the machine learning take action? Because those are 3 different thresholds, and you could get away with machine learning prediction, but expect a human being to take judgment and take action, right? It's important for a product manager to get early signs of AI ROI, which I like to call like the return on investment on the AI efforts. And the business needs to at least align on 5 fundamental things. The first one is this outcome worth guessing? It's a big question. I think it's the product manager's role to define whether or not guessing it is through machines is even worth the time and the value it creates. We need to identify the value that it creates if that guess is correct. And we need to identify the cost to the company if that guess is incorrect. And because the reality of AI is that it's not always going to work. And engineering, it's very, very deterministic. We know it's going to work. But in AI, the executive, the leadership team and the organization needs to at least align with the expectations that we're trying to replace something that a human would do. Even a human gets it wrong. So what's the value of success? What's the cost of failure? Can we live with this cost of failure? What are the business KPIs we can expect with a 75, 76% accurate AI, and what are the AI ML KPIs we're looking around? So in this case, what are the probability of it getting it right versus getting it wrong? And if the business cannot align on that, it's going to be very hard for a product manager to push an AI product forward, because the data operations, the model operations, and the whole operationalization of AI, that's about a complete cultural change, because then the company isn't used to selecting data, sourcing it, synthesizing it, exploring it, and cleaning it, as well as working with models, selecting models, training them, evaluating them, and then putting it in the real world and seeing if it's going to be consumed correctly, monitoring it and analyzing it. This is a completely different way of working. And if you do all of that and you get 20% accuracy and you're targeting 76% accuracy, does that mean the company has to pull the plug on it? And as a product manager, you don't want your feature to basically lose any momentum. You want it to see in the world. And if you've already spent 90% of the budget putting something out there and it's 20% accurate, does that mean failure? And you want the organization to be supportive of the fact that this is a type of projects where the data basically, the better the data is, the better the outcome is going to be, but you cannot get that good data from the onset. So it's a long-term decision that it needs its own roadmap. It needs its iterative, 3, 4, 5, 6 iterations, maybe 2 years worth of iterations until you get to that accuracy level. And are they willing to support putting something in the real world that is providing inaccurate results? And how are they going to prevent this from legal issues or from having customer complaints? And oftentimes there's ways around it, right? There's ways of leveraging UX, there's ways of leveraging feedback loop in order to make sure that you're protecting yourself. But all of this goes into AI product management, which is not something we cover regularly as product managers, and a lot to learn there.
That's cool. And and Moshe, I think you're back in that space of AI and product management.
Yes.
So
I definitely resonate with everything you said. It's quite complex for product managers. I've been there before, and I'm there again now.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I learned my lesson from the first time. So
experience pays off,
and I'm sure there is more we can talk about. You're going to visit in Toronto soon, so I hope to see you.
Yeah, I'm going to be there in 2 weeks, but I'm trying to be in Toronto a lot more in the coming quarters. we're trying to work with most Canadian startups through the accelerator ecosystems as well as just independently. And I think that we've covered Quebec and we're ready to move into Ontario. So if there's companies down there that could benefit from SOAP and our help, we're going to definitely put ourselves out there.
Yeah. So it will be really, really nice meeting you in person, and we can talk more about that.
Absolutely.
And maybe do another episode about it. If there are any also tools that can help product managers in AI space, that will always be very interesting.
That'd be cool.
We'll be introducing through an article next month. Actually, it's going to be in our newsletter. We call it the AI Canvas, and it's really like the same thing as a business model canvas, but really made for AI product managers to be able to work with the leadership team on the actions you want this AI to take, the value of success, the cost of failure, the gains the company's going to get, and all these questions answered in one page, because it is the foundation of any AI product or initiative within an organization.
Very nice. No, I'm looking forward to see that.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about it. That'd be awesome. Well, cool. Thanks so much, Paul, for joining us today. It's been a really good conversation. I've learned quite a bit, and it's really got me thinking about some cool stuff in the future. And thank you, Moshe, and thank you to all of our listeners. We appreciate you. Take care.
Thank you very much,
Thanks
Paul. Thank you, Matt.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Matt.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Moshe.